open with prayer, and then there's a little bit of housekeeping stuff to do here, and then we'll dive right in. So let's pray. Father, we thank you for today. Thank you for your goodness and graciousness to us. God, thank you for the opportunity to get into your word, to look at the different names and titles that you have ascribed unto yourself. And God, help us to see the lessons that are there that we can take and apply to our lives. And Father, help it to be more than basic knowledge that we take and promptly forget, but help us to be something that we can meditate on in the days to come, we ask. In your name, amen. All right. And I didn't bring my phone up. Calendar. If one of you have a calendar in front of you, because I don't, mine is sitting back there. July 7th? 14th. July 14th. Is that a Sunday? If somebody could double check here real quick. July 14. I think is a Sunday, I think. Okay. July 14th, and then the following week, which you can do the math and figure that one out, I will be out. I will be in Michigan and then on the way back from Michigan. If anyone here would be interested in teaching this class in those 2 weeks, let me know or let Pastor know, because I won't be here. And so if you'd be interested, just let me know or let Pastor know so we can try to get that covered. I'd like to do that, get that covered here a little bit in advance rather than a couple days before say, oh yeah, guess what? So if you'd be interested in helping out with that, does not need to be using my notes. You could, if you have something else you'd like to share, that's perfectly fine. In fact, at the moment, my notes are non-existent. And so looking that far ahead, if you'd be interested, if you have something you want to share, or if you wouldn't mind doing it, but you would like to have something to share, we can pull notes too. So just let either Pastor or myself know, and that will help. Housekeeping about this. This was an odd week, and the next couple of weeks, an odd week for this one. Okay, I don't know about you. Yesterday was neighborhood yard sale day, and I had 2 years worth of stuff to get rid of, and so participated to a degree in that. And there's always that conflict. I would like to sell my valuables to make money. My wife would like to donate them to Goodwill and get them out of the house. And so there's always that conflict. I was texting my mom during all of this. Actually, I was texting the whole family and say, hey, I'm expecting you here. Of course, they all live in Wisconsin and Michigan and Florida, so I don't think they were going to make it, but I could try. And I said, I'm expecting you here. Please bring cash. And Mom texts back, and she says, how's it going? I'm like, well, lots of people. Well, not enough people, but we're trying to get stuff gone. I have a garage, but the garage is, maybe it's like your garage, maybe not. My garage is actually a storage shed that's attached to the house. That's why we have a driveway for cars. But trying to get stuff out. Even the stuff that is so incredibly valuable, when you stop and think about it. I've got stuff, it's time for confession here, okay? I've got stuff in boxes that were in the same boxes when I moved up here from Texas in 2000, whatever it was. Okay. And there's stuff that really I don't want to get rid of, but it's like I haven't moved them since I moved up here. And again, that was more than a couple years ago now. And so it's like, well, I'm going to sell them, but I'm not going to give them away. If somebody wants to buy it, then they're going to have to want it to a degree. And the good thing about the world we live in now, I have my little eBay app, and I can take a picture of whatever I'm looking at, and I can see what it's selling for on eBay. So if somebody wants to buy it, hey, I've got a price for you. Well, yard sale. You got to get ready for yard sale and everything else. All of that's competing with time, and time is a commodity that we do not have an unlimited supply of. You've run into that. It doesn't matter how fast you work, how much you get done. There's always more stuff to do than there is time. And so I always start Sunday school either Sunday evening, if I've got a couple minutes before I get ready for work, or Monday afternoon, and then I start working on it. Well, this week was just an odd week for a variety of reasons, and I come back at the end of the week to put all the finishing touches on it, and I don't like the way it's coming together. So now it's not wrap it up, it's rebuild the crazy thing. And all of that to say, there may be an error or two. This is not the inspired version, okay? There may be an error or two, or a discrepancy between what you have in your notes and what I have on the slides are the last thing I build. Okay, so I think everything's good, but if not, let me apologize ahead of time. And then introduction is not part of the introduction. So let me give the introduction in the notes first and then dive into the other part that I have. Isaiah 9:6, we're not going to turn there. That's the passage that we've been using as the introduction. Unto you a child is born, and his name shall be called. And it gives a list of names that we said aren't names. They're titles. They're descriptors. But God does that a lot in his word, where he says, this is who I am. And that's not who he is, that's what he is. But he does it on purpose. God doesn't do anything by mistake. God doesn't do anything haphazardly. God knows what's important, and he focuses on those things. And we are important, and he focuses on us. And he gives us those names, those titles, those descriptions for us, so that we can better understand who he is. And so our title that we have here, or excuse me, our introduction, the same introduction that we've had for the last couple of weeks, slight modification, took out the two subpoints on this next one here, but God uses these names and titles to describe himself, and they have meaning. I grew up in Upper Michigan, not far, just down the, I say just down the road, from Mom and Dad's house, 10, 15 minutes, is Kitchitikipi. Means nothing to you. It means the big spring. It's a 40-foot natural spring where you can go on a hand-pulled raft and see clearly the water, everything down 40 feet deep. It's a state park now, and it is a fairly well-visited state park. But if somebody just walks up to you and says Kitchitikipi, you probably don't know what it means. There are lots of Indian names like that. It has a very specific name for, not for what they felt like, but for what they saw, what they were seeing. These names have meanings. And we see that as we go around the world. Different cultures name things based upon what those words mean. Names have meaning. And then each name adds more detail to our understanding of God. And that's really, I said I have a little bit additional introduction here. That's really what I want to focus on right there in this additional introduction. I don't have notes for it, but I was thinking this morning, when we're praying, do we think of these names and titles of God as we speak with him? Many of these names and titles of God are used in prayers. Not all of them, but many of them are used in prayers as the one praying talked to God and said, hey, you are my, one that we mentioned in the introduction last week, you are my shield and buckler. We're communicating with God. Well, that caused me to think, well, what really is prayer? Prayer is nothing more than conversation with God. When we talk to God, do we talk to God? Do we use the names and titles? Hey, God, and I was thinking, again, everything last week had to do with the stones. Today, I'll just give you kind of a heads up, everything has to do with rocks. Almost everything has to do with rocks, staying within that same idea. Do we talk and say, hey, God, you are my rock and my fortress. I know, Father, when life gets tough, I can run to you. When we pray, do we talk to God? Do we use what we're seeing and learning here? Or is this simply more knowledge that we take and forget? If all we're doing is hearing and forgetting, then to be perfectly blunt and honest, we're wasting your time and mine. My time, if I'm studying this and not getting really anything out of it, other than saying, well, that's kind of interesting, and then I probably forget about it, what have I really accomplished? The whole purpose with school is so that you can take and learn and remember. If I don't, it was an odd week. I don't typically work Thursday nights right now, although I start working Thursdays again this week because we're short on managers. But this last week that just concluded, I didn't work Thursday, but I had to work Friday morning at 5 o'clock because it was time for the biannual AED training. And I had to go in and get first aid and CPR and first aid or AED training. So if you have problems, I can shock you like nobody's business. But seriously, I had to go in for AED training. if all I do is sit in class so that I can get my card and I have no idea what to do and never use it if I need to, what's the point? If I'm reading the Word of God and all I do is read it and don't learn it and know how to apply it, well, what's the point? So my prayer and desire is, God, help this to help me and help it to help those that hear it. And with that, let us dive in. First one, my rock and my fortress. Now, depending on, I know we use primarily King James. Some of you may have a new King James, I don't know. Some of the translation, there are words, and you know this, you've seen this, there are words that are used, and they may have 3 or 4 very similar synonyms or words that they could be translated as. And this is one of those. Some texts will say my rock and my fortress. Some will say my rock and my deliverer. The idea is the same. The deliverer here, kind of an interesting one. Go to Psalm 18. Psalm 18. That's where we'll start this morning. We'll actually be in this one a couple of times, and I don't remember if I put them back to back or not. Psalm 18. In this one, in this verse, it says, you're my rock, fortress, and deliverer. So it kind of groups them together. Look at verse 1. I will love thee, O Lord, my strength. The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, my God, my strength, in whom I will trust, my buckler. And if you look at the introduction to the psalm, it says this is a psalm of David. David felt like giving us 2 handfuls of titles within the first 2 verses, didn't he? You're my rock, my fortress, my deliverer, my God, my strength, in whom I will trust, my buckler and the horn of my salvation, my high tower. I will call upon the Lord, who's worthy to be praised. And we'll stop as the reading right there. He is our rock and our fortress. Staying within the Psalms, go over to Psalm 31. Psalm 31 and verse 3. I'm sure this one will surprise you, but it says kind of the same thing. Thou art my rock and my fortress. Therefore, for thy name's sake, lead me and guide me, my rock and my fortress. We won't go to it, but the other passage that I have here, 2 Samuel 22:2. The meaning of this, I mean, this is really profound here. I mean, this is something you would have never thought of. The fortress is a place of defense against a foe. Well, that's probably exactly what you thought of. It's the place of defense. It is a fort. I like watching the old westerns. There are a couple channels that I will check and see what's on the TV, and if it's old, like from the 40s, 50s, or 60s, I'll tell my DVR to record it. If it's from the 90s or 2000s, I just ignore it altogether. But I think back to John Wayne, that greatest of all American actors. And you deal with some of those movies, and you had Fort Apache. What was the fort? The fort was this place out in the middle of nowhere that was set up as a place of defense. That's what we think of. In this age, many times the fort was built into or on the mountain. It could be a walled or fortified city. It could be simply a military outpost. And, I mean, it's pretty simple. When we hear the fortress or the fort, that's what we think of. Some basic thoughts that came to mind, and a lot of the thoughts on these are basic because the terms kind of describe themselves this week. We're involved in a conflict. We're involved in a war, and the war is complete with conflict. Think back, years past within our memory. Our kids have no concept of what it is, but the age and era of the Cold War. What was the Cold War? It was a time in which there was a war with no conflict. That whole concept makes me scratch my head and say, what? Because what is war? Well, how can you have a war with no conflict? Well, in essence, basically, you had 2 sides were waiting for somebody to punch them and say, take that. We're involved in a war that's complete with conflict. The problem is, we can't see the real enemy. We can see the results of the enemy, but we can't see Satan or his demons. We can see the results. We can see the results of sin, but we're involved in this conflict. And this conflict is very, very real. In fact, Paul wrote and he said, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against," and he starts talking about principalities and powers and all these different things that really we can't see. But the fact that we cannot see them does not make the conflict any less real. And so we're involved in this. Even an impregnable fortress may fall over time. Think back to the ancient city of Petra. The ancient city of Petra was this city. The city was built into the mountain, into the rocks. And it was a narrow pass to get in. So if you tried to bring your army in, they would drop stuff on you, you were in trouble. What good does it do against an F-16 that flies over the top? What good does it do against drones with somebody sitting in Omaha, Nebraska shooting at them? Right? Over time, even an impregnable fortress may fall. But our rock and our fortress will not fall. Our rock and our fortress is undefeated and will remain so. We face the enemy every day. Oops, hold on here. The rock and the fortress might be built on the mountain, might be built into the mountain. You get up on that high point. If you go down to Gettysburg and you're driving around and taking the battlefield tour and you get to Round Top, what was the advantage? You had the high ground. The high ground, in military history, the high ground has always been advantageous. We'll see that again on one of these next points. But the fortress could be built on the mountain or into the mountain, taking advantage of the high ground, making it an impregnable fortress. And we face the enemy every day, but we have a place of safety to which we may flee. When life gets tough, when things don't go the way we're supposed to, we have a rock and a fortress. And that should give us great comfort, because there will be days, there will be times when nothing goes right. There will be times we throw up our hands and say, "God, I don't understand." Or maybe it's that one-word question, why? Ever ask that? Most people have. And if you haven't, guess what? You probably will fairly soon. Why? And yet when things don't go the way we thought they were going to, and things aren't working out the way we think they should, we have a rock and a fortress. We have a place of safety, of defense, a place where we can go for relief. The next one that we have here, my strength and my Redeemer. And again, in some texts, it may say my rock and my Redeemer. In some passages, even within, in some passages, it might say my rock and my Redeemer. And then in another passage in the same text, say my strength. But my strength and my Redeemer. We're in the Psalms here. Let's stay here. Go back to Psalm 19. We'll start there, and then we'll go to Psalm 18 again. Psalm 19:14. 19:14. Tell you what, we're going to take a moment's pause before we get to that. I love Psalm 19, so we're going to take a moment. I'll go to verse 1. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. Day unto day uttereth speech, and night unto night showeth knowledge. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. A pause right there. We look around. We see. As believers, we look around, we see, hopefully we see the mighty work of God. Unbelievers, I ask, how can they not see the mighty work of God? There is no rational explanation for what we see out there apart from God. And the psalmist says, the heavens declare the glory of God. Christian scientists over the ages, not just recently, over the ages, have looked at the creation of God and said, wow, isn't he great? And yet the unbelieving scientist says, oh, look at this. This proves there's no God. Wrong. Staying within the psalm, drop down to verse 7. Verse 7. The law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The statutes of the Lord. Think of Psalm 119 and all these verses that talk about God's words. We have kind of the same thing taking place in these few verses right here. Look at verse 10, talking about the words of God. More to be desired are they than gold. That should be the statement of every one of us, the statement of our hearts. That I want to know his word more than anything else, including gold and silver. More to be desired are they than gold, yea, than much fine gold. Sweeter also than honey and the honeycomb. Moreover, by them is thy servant warned, and in keeping of them there is great reward. When I know what God said, that should be thrilling to my heart. And when I do what God said, that should bring comfort to my heart. Now we can finally get to verse 14. Verse 14, let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Think of the rock that we talked about last week, using the word stone as it was given in the text. That place where we can go and run for defense. It gives us a place of strength. And that's what it's referencing here. My strength and my Redeemer. And we'll come back to the Redeemer idea in a little bit. First of all, turn back just a page or two, depending on how your Bible's laid out, to Psalm 18. Psalm 18, verse 2. We looked at the psalm already. We looked at the verse already. The Lord is my rock and my fortress, my deliverer, my God, my strength in whom I will trust, my buckler, the horn of my salvation, and my high tower. And so we have these two passages. We don't see Redeemer here, and yet we kind of do. Look at our meaning here. First of all, our strength here is the idea of the rock or the barricade. That place where we can go. Think, if you will, again, I'm thinking old westerns here. Okay? The bad guys are getting ready to ride into town, so they roll the wagons out to the edge of town and tip them all over so they can hide behind them. It's not a fortress, not a fort at all. It is a barricade. It is something that they can get behind. It's not going to keep the enemy out forever, but it will give them some protection. That's what this is referencing here, that my strength, my rock, and my Redeemer. That rock is the idea of a barricade. It's something that we can get behind even when we don't have the whole fort around us. It gives us protection in this singular instance. What I'm facing right now. This might not help me tomorrow when the attack's coming from over here, but it will help me right now. God's word is good right now. It's helpful right now. And then the idea of Redeemer here is the kinsman. Think, if you will, in this case, I was thinking of Ruth and Boaz. What was taking place here as we read through the story? The near kinsman, the one who redeemed her. When it talks in Psalm 18:2, my strength, it's using the idea of the rock here. It's the same idea. And my Redeemer is my kinsman or my avenger, the one who fights on my behalf. And the basic, very simple thoughts today. Our desire should be to live in a way that is acceptable to God. We saw that in Psalm 19:14. Let my words and actions be acceptable in thy sight. We go to him for protection. In this case, it's protection against what I'm facing right now. What I'm going through right now. I don't have time with what I'm going through. I don't have time to go home and break out all my Bible and commentaries and do a group. But I do know what I heard in church recently. I do know what I read in my devotions recently. And those can help me with what I'm facing right now. That's why it's so important that we be actively engaged and listen. And God, help me to get out of this something I can use today. We go to him for protection. And he fights on our behalf. He is our avenger. He's our Redeemer. Usually when we think of the idea of the Redeemer, we think of the one who bought us back, and that is very true. But he's also then our avenger, the one who fights for us. Staying right here. I don't have this in the notes because I knew it was right here already. I should have just put it in. Our strong tower. Our strong tower. Look at Psalm 18:2. Again, I don't have it in those, but look at the very last one that's mentioned here in this verse. The Lord is my rock, my fortress, my deliverer, my God, my strength, my buckler, the horn of my salvation, my high tower. The high tower and the strong tower are basically the same thing. We'll stay within the Psalms here. The Proverbs one we can look at later. We'll go over to Psalm 61. Psalm 61. And verse 3, 61:3. For thou hast been a shelter for me and a strong tower from the enemy. We mentioned already that the fortress often was built into the mountain or on the mountain. But what if you're in the plains? What if you are a city that's built in the plains or in the valley? Then what? What they would often do is they would build a high place, a tower. And from that tower then, they would take advantage of having the artificial high ground so that when it was time for defense, they had the advantage. The meaning here, quite simply, the strong is a mighty or a stronghold. And a tower could be a tower, a watchtower. So this is a mighty tower or a mighty watchtower. Again, so much of what we see today is kind of self-explanatory. There was no deep hidden meaning within these words. It's a strong or a high tower. There are examples within the scripture of the advantage of a high tower. There are advantages, illustrations where somebody went to do battle and somebody from a high threw down a rock. I mean, really profound weapon of war there, right? Threw a rock and it hit the guy in the head and killed him. Why? Because he had that high tower. The tower, it's not like it is completely impregnable, but you have an advantage if you can use it. God is the high tower, and he's in this. He's fully aware. Again, one of the advantages of the high tower is it gives you the place where you can see off into the distance. God is, I think I have it here, he is omniscient. He is, proverbially, he's in this high tower. He is fully aware of all that's taking place. There's no one who is going to sneak up on God's beloved, because God is fully aware of all that's taking place. We have an enemy that wants to destroy us because we're believers, because we're the children of God. Satan has been fighting against God since the beginning of human time and before. He wants to destroy us. We have a God who is fully aware of that, and nothing that Satan does is out of the line of sight for God. If you go hunting, now I haven't been hunting since I moved up here. If you go hunting and you're at ground level, sometimes you may have twigs and branches that get in the way. And that little twig can deflect your shot. Maybe you've got it completely lined up and you miss. And you say, how did I miss? And you look out there and you see that little twig that's just, you clipped it and it deflected your bullet. God knows right where all those twigs and branches are. And he's not distracted by them. And the prey on the other is not hidden from him. God is in this high tower. He's looking down and sees the full and complete picture. He's omniscient. A strong tower. Staying with the idea of rocks and foundations and all that, God's the builder. The builder. We're going to go to Hebrews this time. It's not the only instance in which this is alluded to. In fact, in this passage, it is more of an analogy or an allusion. But let's go there, Hebrews 3. And verse 3. talking about Moses and all here. For this man was counted worthy of more glory than Moses. Well, what man is it talking about? Well, if you look up, it's talking about Jesus Christ. Consider the apostle, the high priest of our profession, Christ Jesus, who was faithful to him that appointed him also as Moses was faithful. For this man was counted more worthy than Moses. So it's using Moses as a Moses, the giver of the law, the greatest of all the Jews. It says, and this one was greater, was more important, was higher. Okay? Inasmuch as he who hath builded the house hath more honor than the house. Now, it's not referencing him as a title here. It's not saying that he is the builder. It's using him as, but the analogy is there. It says the builder of the house is of greater glory than the house itself. He is the builder. Think, if you will, over also in Hebrews, the author and finisher of our faith. He's the one that started and finished. Okay? He's built this. He's completed this. And we have here, there's more of an analogy. And I don't think, there's one of my oopses here. I think analogy might be a blank in your notes, but not on my slides. Which means that preparers might be the same way. What do you know? This is more of an analogy than a given title. And God prepares us. He makes us ready. The thoughts kind of go along with that. Self-made. You know, the people who talk about being a self-made man, the whole idea of being self-made is a fallacy. God is not only a builder, he is the master builder. If you are getting involved in a building project, typically what you want some guy that knows what he's doing. And not some guy who's trying to figure out what he's doing. Okay? You want some guy that's good at this. Well, how good? Like, I want the best. I want the best that I can get. God is the master builder. When he builds the believer, it's not just, well, let me throw these pieces together and see what happens. When God builds his church, he knows what he's doing. He's the master builder. The one who builds the house is of more glory than the house. And so I need to keep in mind, regardless of what I accomplish, I am but nothing compared to him. The one who built, the one who designed me is of more glory than I am. He is the one, what did the psalmist say? That he is worthy of worship. I'm not worthy of worship. He is worthy of worship. The builder is worthy of worship. Staying within that idea here, the foundation. He is the foundation. Go to 1 Corinthians 3. 1 Corinthians 3, verse 11. And the idea of the foundation showed up last week. It shows up this week. Last week we talked about the chief cornerstone, and we'll see that here in just a moment. This week we're looking at the foundation itself, 1 Corinthians 3 and verse 11. For other foundation can no man lay than that is laid, which is Jesus Christ. So it's not giving him a title, but it's saying that he is the foundation. Okay? Well, the meaning here, as I looked this one up, is pretty profound. Guess what it means? It means the foundation. Or foundation stones. So that which we build upon. We need a sure foundation. Don't forget that thought, because we're going to see that in the next main point here. A sure foundation. As a foundation, he is rock solid. Think of the wise man built his house upon the rock. And as a foundation, it was interesting. And I think I've got a couple of notes on this. Yes. I will try to hold this thought and remember it till we get into the next point here with the sure foundation. So I may not remember, but I will try. Matthew 18. Matthew 18, we're familiar with Peter's confession. Peter is this rock. Christ was the rock. Peter's confession, thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. Concrete, solid. Okay? Christ says, hey, on this rock I will build my church. On what rock? I am the Christ, the Son of the living God. That's the foundation for us. If I lose sight of that, I lost sight of the most important elements. He is the Christ, the Son of the living God. He is God. He's the foundation. Well, let's staying within this idea here. Here's a sure foundation. Go to Isaiah 28. Isaiah 28. And verse 16, 28:16. Therefore, thus saith the Lord God, behold, I lay in Zion for a foundation, a stone, a tried stone, a precious cornerstone, a sure foundation. He that believeth shall not make haste. There's that sure foundation. Looking up to see, okay, what is this really saying here? The idea of sure literally means appointed or established or firmly placed. That would be that chief cornerstone. Okay? Foundation, as we've already seen, it's a foundation or a base. It's a sure foundation. This foundation is very firmly established. It's on bedrock. Okay? It is established in a way that nothing is going to shake it. And so I'm thinking about this. This was last night as I'm thinking about it. I had in this point here. In this postmodern world in which we live. I had lessons on postmodernism 5 years ago now, I think. This postmodern world in which we live that says there are no absolutes. Everybody has their own set of right and wrong. And it might be right today and wrong tomorrow. It all depends on your situation. Okay, in this postmodern world in which we live, in which there are no absolutes, we have an immutable God. Well, what does immutable or immutability mean? It means I am the Lord God, I change not. What God said yesterday is the same, today will be the same tomorrow. So when God says, thou shalt not bear false witness, he meant that then, he meant that now, he means that in days to come. He's immutable. He is a sure foundation. I don't have to stop and think, I wonder what God is thinking today. I know what God is thinking today because he told me what he thought yesterday. And if in Genesis 6 he looked at man and saw the wickedness of man and it broke his heart, then I know today, guess what? God sees the wickedness of man and it breaks his heart. Our God is trustworthy under any circumstances. He is a sure foundation, regardless of what's happening. When we talk about the changing winds of time or the shifting sands of time, and we'll talk every once in a while, you'll hear, especially in political season, which is like every year now, they'll talk about they need to get out and see which way the winds are blowing so that they can make a decision. I don't need to figure out what God thinks. I know what God thinks. He's trustworthy. Now, I thought this was interesting. Again, these last couple points here are looking at foundations. And so I was looking at a couple things on foundations last night, and I don't remember what the website was now, but it was talking about foundations. It was talking about skyscrapers. I put into Google, because Google knows everything, right? I put into Google asking about how deep are skyscraper foundations. And the Willis Tower, used to be known as the Sears Tower in Chicago, real tall building, okay? 114 stories tall, I think, something like that. Kind of a cool sight when you go up there, but it's been a long time since I've been up. So you go up there. The foundation is like 100 feet deep or something like that. Like, wow. But the statement on the website, and because we're not taking notes and I didn't put the website down, but I could find it if you needed me to, their statement was, before ever building up, we need to build down. Like, I like that. And when you think about it, we need to establish, we saw here in 1 Corinthians 11, a firm found, 3:11. Yeah, 1 Corinthians 3:11. He is our foundation. We need to have a firmly established foundation. And we have one if we've put our faith and trust in Jesus Christ. For other foundation can no man lay than that is laid, Christ Jesus. He is our sure foundation. Nothing is going to shake him. The world's strongest earthquake could come, and it's not going to shake that foundation. We have a firmly established foundation. And so we'll go into the conclusion. There was one other point here that I had, and I took it back out, and I don't remember. It may have had to do with foundation. One thing I saw had our foundation, but then I couldn't find a passage that said our, so I was like, I don't know where they came up with that. So we go into the conclusion then. Again, fairly simple here. He is a stone. We saw that last week. Indeed, he was the chief cornerstone. He was the stone in the corner that sets the angle, sets the scope of life. And not only is he a stone, but he is a rock. And not only was he as a rock, but he is our full foundation. And not only was he the foundation, but he is a sure foundation. He is a firmly established foundation. He is a foundation that's not going anywhere at any time. I think back over all the many years of life. How many best friends have I had? How many best friends have you had? At work every year we have to do a poll that's devised by Gallup, a survey. I think it's really dumb. But anyhow, we have to do this survey. And one of the questions was, they may have taken it out finally, but one of the questions was, do you have a best friend at work? I'm like, yes, my paycheck. No, I don't have a best friend at work. I go to work, I do a job, I go home. Now, there may be some people there who do have a best friend at work, but their lifestyle is not like mine, and I'm not interested in their lifestyle. So I go to work, I do a job, and I go home. However, I do have a best friend in life, and that is my God, who's not going anywhere. He is a friend that sticks closer than a brother. He is a sure foundation. He's not changing. Best friends? I had some in high school. Haven't talked to him since high school. I had best friends in college. Don't think I've seen them since college. I had best friends in Texas, and I've talked to them a few times since we moved. Right? Best friends come and go. God doesn't. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And it's important that we understand that. Now, but earlier in this lesson today, we talked about the fact that I have a place of refuge. I have a fortress. I have a barricade. I have this place of refuge where I can go when attacked. Or maybe it's a place of refuge when I can go when tired and weary, and I just need some time. You've been out fighting and fighting and fighting, and say, God, I am all worn out. And God says, come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, all ye that weary, all you are tired. Come unto me, and I will give you rest. Well, how can I do it? Because he is a fortress. He is a place where I have defense. I have peace from the battles and wars around me. I mean, we look at these names and titles of God today looking at primarily foundations or rocks and fortresses. He is that place of refuge. There's a couple here, a couple hymns. Our church has one foundation, is Jesus Christ. Some of the old hymns of the faith are pretty majestic, are they not? This one's a new hymn. I think we just sang this one recently. Maybe it was a Sunday night. I run to Christ. And it talks about when faced with the fears and troubles of life, I have a place I can go. He's this fortress or this barricade. This is an old majestic hymn by Martin Luther. A mighty fortress is our God, a bulwark never failing. Or how firm a foundation, as now I wait for J. Vernon McGee. But how firm a foundation. Some of these, and there are others. I just added in these few that came to mind very, very quickly here. Some of the hymns that we sing, as I mentioned, I add these in there because as we get into life, and you know what? Let these hymns run through our mind and help us to have the peace and comfort that only they can bring. So the names of God. Now, I mentioned earlier, if you're interested in teaching July, 7th and whatever here, 14th, let me know. Which then causes me, I have a few weeks before I'm gone. I'm trying to decide, okay, what am I going to do? The honest answer, I don't know yet. I will figure this out either tonight or tomorrow. I may look at more names of God over the next few weeks and then start into the Mediterranean Sea after I come back. Or I may look at some Mediterranean Sea before I leave, and then we'll part the sea rather than the Red Sea, and then I'll come back and pick up with it. I don't know yet. So stay tuned for whatever happens next week. It will be thrilling. You'll be on the edge of your seats waiting with excitement, I know. Let's pray, and we'll be done with this. Father, thank you for your goodness and graciousness to us, God. Help us to always take confidence, to have comfort in the fact that you are our fortress in difficult and troubled times, that you are the rock that we can go to. You're the barricade that gives us safety. And Father, help us to know that you're our strong tower. God, you're the foundation upon which we build our lives. And help us to know that that foundation is sure. Father, so much tucked within these verses today. Help us to meditate upon them, to think about them throughout the week. Father, help them, again, to give us peace and comfort in a troubled world, we ask. In your name.